I got into my husband's car and found a tube of personal lubricant in the glove compartment. I didn't say a word. I just secretly replaced it with industrial superglue. And what happened next forced our neighbors to make an emergency call to the fire department. I sat at the kitchen table, the silence in the house as thick as morning fog, a silence that had become a constant, unwelcome guest. The old clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my late mother, ticked with a relentless, accusatory rhythm. Each beat was a painful reminder of a life I was beginning to suspect was a beautiful, meticulously crafted lie. My husband Arthur had just returned from one of his countless business dinners. He looked not merely exhausted, but haunted, as if he carried the weight of a secret too heavy to bear. His face was a map of fatigue and guilt, lines etched around his eyes and mouth that hadn't been there a year ago. He tossed his jacket on the sofa with a weariness that felt performative, loosened his tie as if it were a noose he was desperate to escape, and collapsed onto the bed, the familiar springs groaning under his weight. He didn't even bother to shower. The faint, expensive scent of his sandalwood cologne hung in the air, but it was mixed with a new, alien fragrance, a sweet, floral perfume that felt like an intrusion, a brazen confession from a life I didn't know he was living. A few minutes later, the gentle hum of his snoring filled the house, a sound that once brought me comfort but now felt like a mocking lullaby. A lullaby for a fool. I got up, moving with the quiet, practiced grace of a wife of 35 years, and began to tidy up the mess he'd left in the living room. His jacket, his wallet, his cell phone, his old laptop. The phone screen was still on, a new email glowing like a sinister omen. I frowned. Arthur never used email. He always said, "Eliza, all this tech stuff is too complicated. I'd rather just make a call." But now, an email. It was right there, in plain sight, a digital ghost from a life I didn't know he was leading. Out of a morbid curiosity that felt both wrong and necessary, I opened it. The message was short, a mere handful of words that would shatter my world. "You were incredible tonight, Dad. Is less than 3. I froze, as if someone had slapped me. The digital world was a cruel mirror, reflecting a truth I was too terrified to see. Dad, the word echoed in my mind. Who was calling him that? And in such an intimate, affectionate tone? I swiped down, my thumb trembling, looking for more clues, but there was nothing. Just a strange email address, a jumble of meaningless characters that offered no answers, only more questions. A shiver ran through me, not from the cold, but from a profound, bone-deep fear. It felt like a cold wind coming in through a crack in the door of my life, revealing a secret chamber I never knew existed. I glanced at the bedroom and saw Arthur turn over with a sputtering snore, his face still and peaceful, a stark and infuriating contrast to the storm raging inside me. My heart pounded like a thief's, a frantic, guilty beat. I quickly put the phone back, my hands shaking so much I almost dropped it. I continued cleaning up, my movements now mechanical, robotic. I gathered his dirty clothes to take to the laundry. As I checked his pant pockets, I felt a folded piece of paper, crisp and new. It was a receipt from a fancy steakhouse in Philadelphia, dated that very night. I frowned. Philadelphia? He had told me he was meeting his partners in Wilmington. A tiny, bitter laugh escaped my lips. Arthur hated driving to Wilmington. Philadelphia, on the other hand. I tried to remember the last time Arthur took me to a place like that. Maybe 10 years ago, when I opened my first bakery, the flour mill. It was a memory etched in my mind, the flickering candlelight, his proud smile, the way he toasted my success. Now that memory felt tainted, a faded photograph in a scrapbook of deceit. The receipt showed a party of 2, a bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, the same wine he had bought me for our 10th anniversary, a wine I had never forgotten, and main courses of filet mignon and a lobster pasta. I took out my own phone and, with a silent, determined resolve, snapped a picture of the receipt and the email. I didn't want to believe it, but a woman's intuition, the intuition of a wife of 35 years, is a deep, primal knowing. Something was going on, and I had to find out what it was. My hands were trembling, not just with anger, but with a deep, existential dread. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to witness the spectacular collapse of my entire life. I went to the garage. Arthur's old SUV was still warm, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and that faint, sweet perfume from his clothes. I opened the passenger door, a small, cold dread gripping my stomach. I turned on my phone's flashlight and checked every corner. There was nothing out of the ordinary, just some loose change and an empty water bottle. But as I reached into the passenger side glove box, my fingers brushed against something plastic and slippery. I pulled it out, and my heart almost stopped. A tube of used personal lubricant. There was dried residue on the cap, a sticky, damning piece of evidence. I stood there in the dark garage, staring at it as if it were a venomous snake, a tangible manifestation of my worst fears. Arthur and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always said he was tired, that age had sapped his desire. So, what was this lubricant for? The question echoed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow to my fragile reality. I felt paralyzed, but a cold, clear survival instinct kicked in. I put it back exactly where I'd found it. I wiped my hands on a rag, scrubbing them raw, as if I were afraid the betrayal would leave a permanent mark on my skin. I continued searching, this time more carefully, more methodically. Under the back seat, I found some crumpled cocktail napkins, soaked in that same sweet, floral perfume. It wasn't a man's scent, and it wasn't my soft, familiar rose fragrance. The scent was alien, defiant, a loud, vulgar shout of infidelity in the quiet sanctuary of our garage. I took photos of everything, the lubricant, the napkins, as if I could capture the scent in an image. I closed the car and went back inside, the weight of the evidence pressing down on me, heavier than any 50-pound sack of flour I had ever lifted. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands trembling uncontrollably as I picked up Arthur's phone again. By this point, I was almost certain he was cheating on me. I checked his messages, but there were only work chats, cold and dry, like a desert landscape. His inbox was empty, except for that one strange email. I checked the sent and draft folders. Nothing. Everything was too clean, too perfect, suspiciously so, as if he had erased every trace of his deception. A master of lies, I thought bitterly. My rage was now a cold, hard stone in my chest, and a new, more dangerous emotion began to stir within me. A desire for truth, a need to expose the lie, no matter the cost. The next morning, just as the sun rose and the soft light filtered through the window curtains, I was already awake, a ghost in my own house. The image of the lubricant, the restaurant receipt, and that email wouldn't stop swirling in my head, a venomous carousel of doubt. I stood in the kitchen, my hands busy, but my mind a frantic whirlwind. I made a simple breakfast, 2 fried eggs, some toast, and a cup of the strong black coffee Arthur liked. I had barely slept. Arthur came down looking tired, his hair a mess, his eyes still groggy. He sat at the table, grabbed his coffee cup, took a sip, and set it down. "I have an important meeting today," he said in a husky voice, a rehearsed line he'd used countless times before, without looking me in the eye. "I'm sure I'll be home late." He was so good at this, I thought. The easy lies, the casual tone, it made my blood run cold. I nodded with a strained smile, though all I wanted to do was scream, "Where is the meeting? With whom? In Philadelphia again?" But I held back, my rage a silent fire, and simply replied, "All right, be careful." He got up. He gave me a light pat on the shoulder, a gesture that felt more like an afterthought than a sign of affection, and left. The door closed, leaving the kitchen in silence, and me with a suspicion that was growing into a monstrous certainty. I cleared the table and washed the dishes one by one, the rhythm of the task a small anchor in the storm of my emotions. I couldn't just sit there inventing theories. I needed the truth, hard evidence. I picked up my phone and looked for the number for Mrs. Gable, an old friend who had helped me so much when I first opened the bakery. She had once told me about a good private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases. "Eliza, if you ever need it, I can give you Mr. Keene's number," she had said. "He's very discreet and reliable." I never thought I would need to call him, but now I had no other choice. I dialed her number, my voice trembling. "Evelyn? It's Eliza." Can you help me get in touch with that investigator, Mr. Keene? I need him." She was silent for a few seconds, a pause that spoke volumes. "Eliza, what's going on? Did Arthur do something?" I sighed, my pride bruised and raw. "I just need to know the truth. Can you help me?" Mrs. Gable, a woman of few words but profound intuition, agreed immediately. An hour later, I received a message from Mr. Keene, asking me to meet him at noon at a small cafe downtown. "Mrs. Hayes, please don't worry. I will help you." The message was short, but it was a lifeline in a sea of deceit. At noon, I went to the cafe, a tiny place with worn wooden tables and the aroma of roasted coffee filling the air. I chose a secluded corner, a shadow in a room full of light. Mr. Keene walked in, a middle-aged man, short and stocky, with philosophical eyes that seemed to read everything. I handed him a flash drive with the photos I had taken. The strange email, the restaurant receipt, the lubricant tube, the napkins. "This is all I have," I said, my voice shaky. "I'm not sure, but I think my husband is cheating on me." The words tasted like ash. Mr. Keene nodded, reviewing each image on his phone, his face impassive. "Mrs. Hayes, I understand. I'll start following Mr. Hayes this afternoon. Don't worry, I'll let you know as soon as possible." "Thank you," I said softly. "I just want to know the truth, whatever it may be." I left the cafe and walked through the crowd, but I felt a loneliness I had never experienced before. 35 years of marriage, a lifetime built on a foundation of trust that was now crumbling beneath my feet. I had put all my trust in Arthur. He was my rock, my anchor. And now, here I was, hiring a stranger to follow my own husband. That night, as I sat in the bakery, going over delivery invoices, my phone vibrated. A message from Mr. Keene. I opened it, my heart pounding, the blood roaring in my ears. It was a photo of Arthur, entering a fancy restaurant, holding hands with a woman. I zoomed in on the image, and my heart stopped. It was Chloe, my daughter-in-law, our son Ben's wife. She was wearing a tight black dress, heavy makeup, and intense red lipstick. They didn't look like father-in-law and daughter-in-law. They looked like a couple on a date. I sank into my chair, my hand trembling. "Chloe, how was this possible?" At family gatherings, she and Arthur always acted distant, barely speaking. I now realized it was a masterful act, a performance for my benefit. Mr. Keene sent more photos. In one, they were sitting in a secluded corner, candles on the table. Chloe was leaning toward him, smiling, and Arthur was toasting her, his gaze oddly tender. In 35 years, I had never seen him look at me like that, not even when we were young. He looked at her with genuine adoration, a love I thought was mine. Now it was hers. In the middle of the night, a video arrived. The clock on the wall read 2 a.m. I put on my headphones and pressed play. In the video, Chloe leaned close to Arthur's ear, whispering something that made him laugh loudly, a sound that was a stranger to me. Then they got up and left, and Arthur opened the car door for her as if she were a queen and he were her lover. I replayed the video again and again, a self-inflicted torture. Chloe, whom I had treated like my own daughter, whom I had taught how to make our family's traditional recipes, and Arthur, the man I had given my life to. What were they doing behind my back? Behind Ben's back? I saved all the photos and the video, my hands working on autopilot, my mind in chaos. The next morning, I was in the small kitchen of the bakery when my phone vibrated. More evidence, a series of photos. The first showed Arthur, leaving a law office near the main plaza. By his side was Chloe, in a beige office dress and huge, dark sunglasses. In the next photo, they were standing in front of a 4-star hotel. Then came a short video. I pressed play, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The shot was from a distance, but it was clear enough to see Arthur and Chloe on the 3rd-floor balcony of the hotel. His arm was around her waist, and she was resting her head on his shoulder, and then, like a stab, I saw them share a quick kiss, without trying to hide. I slumped into the chair, clutching the table. Mr. Keene wrote, "They also rented the room for the afternoon. It looks like they're staying the night. I'll keep an eye on them." Just a few hours earlier, Arthur had texted me, "Eliza, won't be home tonight. Have to meet a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest." The tone was sweet, caring, but now I knew it was all a lie. A potential partner. He wasn't out of town. He was here, in a 4-star hotel, with our own daughter-in-law. I opened my portable hard drive and carefully saved every photo and every video. I looked at the image of Arthur's tender gaze toward Chloe. I remembered family gatherings. Ben would joke, "Mom, I think Chloe can't stand Dad. She avoids him like the plague." I believed it too. But now I understood it had all been a farce, a carefully choreographed dance of deception. The next morning, just before dawn, I heard the front door open slowly. Arthur staggered in, smelling of alcohol. The partner was difficult, Eliza, he complained, his eyes red. Had to drink a lot. I'm dead tired. I was in the kitchen, watching him perform, feeling him rub salt in my wounds. Rest, I replied calmly, the practiced voice of a wife. You have to go to work tomorrow. He nodded, gave me a pat on the shoulder, and dragged himself to the bedroom. Minutes later, he was snoring peacefully. When I was sure he was asleep, my phone vibrated. A call from Mr. Keene. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Mrs. Hayes." I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. "I used special equipment. They didn't even notice. I'm sending it to you now." My heart pounded, but I simply replied, "Thank you, Mr. Keene. Send me the file." An audio file appeared. I put on my headphones, sat at the table, and pressed play. The first thing I heard was Chloe's voice, cold and ambitious, a stranger's voice. "Dad, hurry up with that fake contract. I want to have that whole chain of stores already. I want that old hag out of the house." I felt a blow to my chest. Then came Arthur's voice, deep and confident. "Don't worry about those papers. Eliza doesn't know anything. Leave it in my hands. She trusts me too much." It felt like a knife twisting in my heart. They weren't just cheating on me. They were planning to take everything I had built. The flour mill, bakery. My bakery. All the sweat, tears, and sleepless nights. Arthur never once got his hands dirty in the kitchen. He never worked the counter or signed contracts, and now he and Chloe wanted to take it all away. To kick me out of the house I had made a home. I copied the audio to the flash drive. That wretched old hag, that's what Chloe called me. I remembered the days when I taught her, when I hugged her like a daughter. And Arthur, the man I had loved since I was a girl. They had made a joke of me, a fool who still believed in love and family. A regular customer came in, Mrs. Gable, who always bought pastries. "Eliza, your bakery has been packed lately. Your chain of stores is expanding. I'm so proud of you," she said. I forced a smile. "Thank you. I'm doing my best." But inside, I was a wreck. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. Instead, a silent rage burned inside me, like the fire in an oven, ready to ignite. That night at dinner, I sat across from Arthur. He ate and spoke in a monotone voice. "Eliza, I have to sign some important business papers this week. Maybe you should look them over. They're complicated." I could only hear Chloe's voice. "Hurry up and sign the fake contracts. He was testing the waters." I gave him a dry smile. "Yes, I'll look at them later. I'm tired now." Arthur had a few more glasses of wine. When he got up, staggering, and went to the bedroom, I cleared the table. He threw himself on the bed, snoring loudly, and left his car keys on the nightstand, gleaming under the dim light. A siren's call to my revenge. I stared at them, my heart pounding. This was my chance. I entered the bedroom slowly, careful not to make a sound. I grabbed the keys and went straight to the garage. The night was quiet, hushed. I turned on my phone's flashlight. I opened the glove compartment, and there it was, the tube of lubricant, a monument to their infidelity. It was clear they had used it again. I took the tube to the kitchen, placed it on the counter, and washed my hands with lemon soap, scrubbing them raw. I opened the tool drawer and took out a tube of clear, industrial superglue, the same kind I used to fix chairs at the bakery. It was a tool of my trade, now a weapon of my revenge. I carefully unscrewed the cap of the lubricant and filled the tube with the glue, drop by drop, until it was completely full. I wiped the nozzle. It came out smoothly, just like the original. No one would notice the difference. This wasn't a game. It was the first step to getting justice. I put the tube back in the glove compartment, exactly as it was. I opened the trunk to check. There were crumpled bags, an empty water bottle, and an unused condom lying in a corner. My heart skipped a beat, but I wasn't surprised anymore. I took pictures, adding them to the growing collection of evidence. Back in the house, I put the keys back in their place. I grabbed an old book and sat on the living room sofa, pretending to read. My head was spinning. I thought of Ben, my son, who believed he was living happily with Chloe, without knowing the truth. How could I tell him that his wife and his own father were betraying us? An hour later, Arthur woke up and stumbled into the kitchen for water. He saw the keys and didn't suspect a thing. "Still not sleeping, Eliza?" he asked groggily. "No, I'm just reading a bit. Go back to bed." He nodded, drank, and returned to the bedroom. I looked at him as if he were a stranger. But he didn't know that I had already started my counterattack. At dawn, I was in the bakery, kneading dough, channeling my rage into every movement. When I returned home for breakfast, I kept my face calm. "Arthur," I said, "I have to travel to Boston tomorrow to sign a contract with a new partner. I'm sure I'll be home late. Can you take care of dinner?" I watched him. He looked up, surprised, but in his eyes, something was shining. It was relief. "A big contract?" he asked, taking my hand with feigned tenderness. "Don't worry. Go ahead. I'll handle it." That spark in his eyes, that slight curve of his lips, pierced my chest. He wanted me to leave, and I knew exactly why. "Thanks. I'll call you if I get back late." As he left, he forgot his phone on the table. The screen lit up with a missed call. The name that appeared was Chloe. My heart pounded. Before I could touch the phone, Arthur came back, grabbed it in a hurry, and turned off the screen. "Forgot it," he mumbled with a forced smile. He was gone. He wasn't even bothering to hide it anymore. That night, I pretended to be tired. I have to wake up early tomorrow to catch the bus, so I'm going to sleep. "Rest, Eliza. Be careful on your trip." I lay down, but I sharpened my hearing. Close to midnight, I heard him get out of bed quietly. I followed him on tiptoe. I hid behind the thick living room curtain and saw him standing in a dark corner. He put the phone to his ear and spoke softly. "Yes, of course. Come over to the house tomorrow. We won't have to go to a hotel anymore. Eliza has to leave town." I heard a soft giggle, Chloe's sweet voice. "That's great, Dad. Finally, we can relax." "Yeah, come early. I'll be waiting." I stood there, my blood boiling. They were planning to turn my house into their meeting place. I returned to the bedroom, opened a drawer, and took out Ben's old voice recorder. I checked the battery, turned on continuous recording, and hid it behind the bookshelf near the headboard, certain it would capture everything. I lay down, pretending to be asleep. I woke up at 5 a.m. The house was silent, save for Arthur's steady snoring. I was in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee, staring at the skillet of oil on the stove. It was the last step of my plan, a simple smoke trap, but enough to expose the truth. I tied a thin, heat-resistant string to the stove's igniter. I ran it discreetly over to the window and attached it to a heavy old coffee can. All I had to do was pull it from a distance, and the flame would ignite the oil, creating thick black smoke. I opened the window by the stove just a crack, so the smoke could get out. I tested it once. The smoke rose quickly. I turned it off immediately. I put on a jacket, grabbed my large purse, and pretended to be leaving. Before I left, I went into the bedroom and gently shook Arthur. "I have to go to the bus station right now. I'll probably be back late." He opened his eyes. "All right. Be careful, Eliza. Call me if you need anything." Then he buried his face in his pillow and went back to sleep. Instead of going to the station, I went across the street to Mrs. Gable's house. She opened the door, worried. "Eliza, what are you doing up so early? Is something wrong?" "Evelyn," I said, "can I stay here for a few hours? I need to watch my house." She frowned, but poured me a hot cup of coffee and gave me a chair by the window. From there, I could see the entrance to my house, where the truth would be revealed. Around 10 a.m., a taxi pulled up. Chloe got out, wearing a light floral dress and dark sunglasses. Arthur opened the door, looked around in a hurry, and quickly ushered her inside. I gripped my coffee cup, my heart pounding. "It's time," I murmured. I turned on the app on my phone connected to the hidden recorder. The sound started coming through my headphones. Chloe's laughter, the clinking of glasses. Then I heard Arthur's deep voice. "All right, we don't have to hide in a hotel anymore." Chloe laughed. "You really know how to pick your moments. The old hag is gone, right?" I bit my lips, holding back the rage as I listened to her call me that. Then the bed started to creak, along with other sounds I didn't want to keep listening to. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. Just a little longer. A few minutes later, suddenly, Chloe screamed. "What the hell is this, Arthur? We're stuck!" Her voice was filled with panic, almost sobbing. Arthur growled. "Shut up. Wait, let me see." I smiled. I barely touched my phone, which was connected to the string I had set up. I pulled. The stove ignited. The skillet of oil caught fire. Black smoke billowed out of the kitchen window in thick spirals. Mrs. Gable gasped. "Eliza, your house is on fire!" I pretended to be scared, but inside I felt strangely calm. Neighbors started coming out. "Eliza's house is on fire! Call the firefighters!" A man nearby quickly took out his phone and called 911. In my headphones, Chloe's voice was desperate. "Arthur, do something! I can't move!" "Don't scream! I'm trying!" I knew they couldn't do anything. The industrial superglue was at work, trapping them in their most humiliating moment. Just 10 minutes later, the siren of a fire truck sounded. The red vehicle sped up and skidded to a stop in front of my house. I saw my son, Ben, jump out of the driver's seat in his fire chief uniform, his face tense. "My son," he shouted in a firm voice. "Get the equipment ready! Quick! There might be people inside!" I looked at him and felt a sharp pain. My son, always so proud of his family, now he was about to face the cruelest truth. The smoke from the kitchen continued to rise, making Ben and his team believe there was a serious fire. My son led the way, breaking down the front door. The sound of splintering wood echoed in the air. I listened to the commotion coming from the bedroom. Julian's desperate shouts mixed with Chloe's sobs. "Do something, Arthur! I can't move!" "Shut up! Don't scream!" Ben entered the bedroom, and I could imagine what he found. His own father and his wife naked, stuck to each other on the bed, their faces pale with pain and panic. I wasn't there, but through my headphones I heard Ben's voice falter, a strangled, broken sound. "What? What is this?" A firefighter behind him murmured in surprise, "Oh my God!" Another couldn't hold back a nervous laugh, but Ben immediately shouted, "Silence!" I knew that cry wasn't just to maintain order. It was my son's last attempt to hide his pain. The humiliation was now exposed. A firefighter ran out. "Chief, the smoke is under control." It was just a small oil fire, nothing serious. But Ben didn't reply. The neighbors started to arrive, crowding in front of the door, pointing and whispering. "What's happening?" "It's Arthur and his daughter-in-law," a woman shouted. Mrs. Gable, standing next to me, took out her phone and silently started recording, moving the camera closer to Arthur and Chloe, who were writhing in bed, their faces contorted with pain. She looked at me with eyes full of pity and anger. "Eliza, you knew about this, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I just nodded softly. Ben came out of the bedroom. I heard Julian shout, "Get everyone out of here! Close the door, Ben!" But it was too late. The whole neighborhood was gathered, their whispers a chorus of shame. The firefighters, after a moment of hesitation, had to act. They wrapped sheets around Arthur and Chloe, trying to cover their stuck-together bodies, and carried them out on stretchers. I could hear Chloe's broken sobs. "Please, do something. I can't stand it anymore." The whole neighborhood had already seen. There were looks of revulsion, mocking laughs, and shakes of disappointed heads. "What a disgrace, father-in-law and daughter-in-law!" The crowd was still gathered when the ambulance left. I stood among the people, pretending to be surprised, as if I had just run there from the bus station. Ben stood motionless in the yard, his arms hanging, his face pale as a ghost. His teammates avoided looking at him. I wanted to run and hug him, but I held back and walked behind Mrs. Gable, who silently accompanied me to the hospital. We sat in the third-floor hallway. Hours later, a doctor came out. sweat on his forehead. "Mrs. Hayes, we managed to separate them. Fortunately, there was no serious damage. They just need some skin ointment." I nodded, pretending to be relieved, while my fingers discreetly brushed against my purse where I had hidden 2 tubes of thick, spicy mustard. "Thank you, doctor," I said. "Can I see them?" He nodded and led me to the nurse's station, where they gave me 2 tubes of ointment. The moment the nurse turned around, I swapped the tubes for the mustard I had in my purse. My hands moved quickly, rehearsed hundreds of times in my head. I entered the hospital room, feigning concern. "Arthur, Chloe, are you okay?" Chloe was in bed, her eyes red, unable to look at me. Arthur mumbled, "Eliza, I can explain." I didn't let him continue. I placed the tubes of ointment on the table next to the bed and left. Minutes later, a gut-wrenching scream came from the room. "It burns! My skin is on fire!" Julian was writhing in bed, cursing. "What the hell is this?" The entire hallway was in an uproar. An old woman whispered to her son, "It's them. The couple from the video this morning on the internet. The father-in-law with the daughter-in-law. What a disgrace." Mrs. Gable's video had spread. When the crowd dispersed, Ben entered the room with a thick folder in his hand. I had called him, asking him to get the envelope with the evidence and the 2 sets of divorce papers I had ready. He handed me the folder, his gaze empty. I opened it, took out the documents, and placed them on the table in front of Arthur and Chloe. I looked at him directly. 35 years of marriage end here, Arthur. Sign these and then disappear from my son's life and mine." Chloe collapsed, crying, looking at Ben. "Ben, honey, forgive me. I made a mistake. Please." But Ben just looked at her, his gaze as hard as stone, and left without saying a word. Julian tried to grab my hand. "Eliza, listen to me." I pulled away. "Don't say anything else, Arthur. You chose this path." I turned and walked away without looking back. In the hallway, I saw Ben leaning against the wall, his head in his hands. I walked over and put my hand on his shoulder. "Mom," he whispered, his voice broken. "Why did it have to be Dad? Why? Why her?" I didn't answer. I just hugged him tightly, sharing his pain with my own. In that moment, I knew that Arthur and Chloe had lost everything: their honor, their marriage, their dirty plan. But Ben and I had also lost a family. A few weeks after the scandal, the flour mill was busier than ever. Customers came in, not just for bread, but to offer support. "Eliza, you are so strong, Mrs. Gable said, holding a freshly baked pie. "The whole neighborhood is proud of you." I smiled and thanked her. People called me a strong woman, but only I knew that strength came from the broken pieces of my heart. Ben moved in with me right after that day. He didn't talk much about what had happened, but his eyes, once bright, now carried a wound that wouldn't heal. "Mom, I want to stay here for a while," he told me the first night. "I'm going to help you run the bakery." I hugged him. I knew Ben needed time, and so did I. Every morning, we opened the bakery together. "Mom, the Grand Hotel wants to increase their pastry order," he'd call out. These simple moments gave me a peace I hadn't felt in years. Dinners were just the 2 of us. "Mom, can you make that pie this weekend?" he asked me one night, with a faint smile, the first I had seen since the scandal. "Of course," I replied, relieved, "but you have to help me stir the caramel." I started making time for myself. I joined a cooking club. I went for walks with Mrs. Gable. I started to heal. Ben also started to change. He became less quiet, telling me about his work as a firefighter. "We put out a fire at the market yesterday," he told me one night. "It was really dangerous, Mom." I listened, my heart filled with pride. "Please be careful," I said, my voice trembling. "You're all I have left." Ben looked at me with tenderness. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll never leave you alone." Those words were like medicine. One afternoon, while the bakery was full, I sat at the cash register, watching the movement in the street. The bell on the door rang non-stop. The smell of sweet bread filled the air. I looked at the trays of pies and pastries and thought about the entire journey. I had built this bakery with my own hands, from a girl in San Diego to a woman who knew how to endure. Arthur and Chloe wanted to take everything from me, but they had failed. Betrayal is a fire. It burns down everything you thought was real, everything you built, and everyone you thought you knew. It leaves you standing in a field of ash, clutching the few scorched pieces that remain, but that fire also forges you. It burns away the lies, the illusions, and the parts of yourself you gave away too freely. I had lost a husband, but I had gained my freedom. I had lost the illusion of a happy family, but I had found my son again, truly found him. I kept my bakery. I kept Daniel. And most importantly, I kept myself. From those ashes, we learned to build something new, something smaller, perhaps, and scarred, but something infinitely stronger, because this time, it was real.